Welcome back to Pulsegate Gaming. If you're anything like me, then as they've announced the new latest edition of Warhammer 40k, you've been looking at the armies, you've been looking at tabletop wargaming as a whole, and just trying to find out if it's something that you want to get into. At least that's what I've been doing. And so I keep asking myself the same questions over and over again. Is it worth it? Is it worth spending the money on plastic miniatures to play Warhammer? Do I need to spend the money on plastic miniatures to play Warhammer? Can I just play with 3D printed stuff? And what's the difference? If I do get a 3D printer and I start 3D printing my own models, are they better than plastic models? Are they cheaper than plastic models? Are they more durable than plastic models? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Pulsegate Gaming Boxing Night. Tonight we have an incredible matchup for you. He's tried, he's true, and he's always on the sprue. We have 3D models provided for you by any hobby shop you know. They've been around for as long as most of you have been alive, and are they worth it? Can they win this fight? Especially against their competitor, the new upcoming brand new boy to the ring 3D printing models. Let's get it on. So recently, my little brother has taken up playing D&D with some of his friends, and he's been the DM. And he's been reaching out to me and asking me about models because he likes playing D&D that way, where every character has a model of their character, and all of the monsters and things like that you fight are on the table in front of you, and you have the landscape and things out in front of you. So not only are you visualizing the game in your mind, but you're also seeing it on the table. And at first, he was buying all of his models. He was going to Etsy and finding trees and things like that. He was finding different models online in various places for the characters in his group. And he was buying all of these. And I was talking to him about it one day, and he was telling me that it was super expensive. And I just kind of laughed because I know, I've been a DM for a couple years, and I know what it costs to buy all those models. And I know what it takes, to paint them and to put all this work into these models. And so I was really happy when he came to me and asked the question, what's cheaper? Should I just keep buying the models? Is it worth putting the money into buying a printer? Because when we talk about models, I can tell you that a 3D printed model is 25 cents. Sure. Just the cost of the resin for that model is 25 cents. But you got to buy a $300 printer or a $200 printer or a $400, $500 printer, depending on what you want. And so in the end, that model isn't really 25 cents. It's a lot more than that. And I recently watched a YouTube video made by a fellow YouTuber that I'll throw a link in the comments, where he was going through and listing the armies that you could buy for $500 to play Warhammer. With the 26 or 27 factions that there are, he was only able to do it with, I think, 7 different factions. And he was able to, buy enough to have a 1,000-point army. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay. It was just an army that you could play with competitively. And I started to think, that's a good indicator of price. To get into the game, to play, you have to spend $500. Now, is this going to be the best army? No. Is it going to have big, awesome special units in it? Maybe 1 or 2. It's not going to be your ideal army, but it's a competitive one. It's one that you can take to a tournament and you can hold your own. And so I thought, that's a good indicator. So, can you 3D print an army for $500? So a while back, a fellow YouTuber, Battle Brother Sam, posted a video about how many Warhammer models can you print with 1 bottle of resin, and that's a 1 kilogram bottle of resin. Now, we could talk about multiple kinds of printers, right? We could talk about FDM versus resin and things like that. But for the sake of what we're doing, we're going to assume that you want to print 28 millimeter miniatures and you want them to look good. You want them to match the quality of the plastic that you would buy in store. And in order to do that, you would have to do it with a resin printer. I love FDM printers. I love printing with them and I think they're great, and you can get really good quality with them, but it will never match resin. It just won't. And so for the comparison that we're going to do today, we'll stick to resin. I'll paint an FDM miniature for you and I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll check the durability of them as well. But as far as cost wise, we're going to kind of leave them out of it because a resin miniature is going to cost you, 25 cents, 20 cents, whereas with FDM, it's going to cost you 4 or 5. Okay. But again, you are sacrificing that quality for that price. And so we're going to do kind of apples to apples for this. So anyway, Sam found out that with a single bottle of resin, you could print about 70 Space Marine size miniatures. Now, do you need 70 Space Marines for your army? Probably not. If you want that many, that's fine. You can do that. Okay, but that's 70 miniatures with one bottle of resin. Okay, and your bottle of resin is going to cost you, anywhere from $30, $35, something like that. So if you buy a printer, and we'll shoot for a mid-grade printer. We're not going to go too high. We're not going to go, 8K or 6K printers. We'll probably just stick to a 4K printer. You're looking at $250 to $300. And depending on the brand, it can be higher, it can be a little lower than that. And so for the sake of this, we'll say $300. So for $300, and then you have to buy your stuff to clean up the resin, you have to cure it and things like that. We'll throw in another $50 for that stuff. Okay, and depending on what you get, if you get resin that you can just clean off in water, that'll save you some money there. You got to cure it. You got to do, you have to buy a UV light to do that. Lots of different ways you can do it. We'll just say $50. That's without buying a full-on curing station. That's with just getting yourself a light, and some isopropyl alcohol. Just something easy to clean them off with. $350 for your printer and stuff that you need. Plus, I would say that you'll probably need at least 2 bottles of resin, because if you're printing an army, you're not just printing little miniatures all the time. You're going to be printing big miniatures as well. You're going to be printing your big bad bosses. You're going to be printing, trees and things like that for Warhammer and D&D. So 1 kilogram is not going to cut it for an army. Could you get away with 2? I would say yes. But honestly, I would, on the side of caution, get 3 full bottles of resin for your army, for your D&D campaign, for your dungeon run. Okay. And so if we're saying that they're $30 a piece, that's an extra $90. So to 3D print your own army, we'll throw that in there and we'll say 350 plus 90 is $440. So you can print your own army, and it can basically be just about anything you want for $440. You can print your entire D&D campaign. I don't want to say entire, but your characters for the first probably year for $440. Where the real savings comes in is if you decide, I want to make another army. I want to do a second year of my campaign, and I need these creatures and I need these things, because then you no longer have to put in that 3D printer in your cost. And that's $350 off of that immediately. And so for the foreseeable future, you're spending about $100 a year just in resin and maybe some miscellaneous materials to print for your campaign. So, is that better? Cost-wise, sure, it's cheaper, but you also have to put in your time, because I can go and I can buy an army right now. Bring it home and I have my army. Yes, I have to take it out. I have to put it together. I have to clean it, which is time consuming in of itself, but I don't have to print it. Because even if you print an army, you still have to take it out, clean it, glue some stuff together, do some things like that, base it, do those things. It's ultimately just about the same amount of work minus the printing. So is it worth, that money to you to print? In my mind, this one's a clear winner, because I think printing is amazing. And yeah, it's more expensive. It's expensive up front. It's an original investment, but moving forward, you'd never have to pay that again. Sure, even if stuff breaks and things like that, you have to pay it again. But even if you had to pay that full price once a year, it's still... One round down and 3D printed models are in the lead, but plastic models don't look like they're out of this fight yet. So let's get down to painting. Here, we're going to go over 3 different kinds of models. The first model we're going to go over is just a standard Warhammer Space Marine. This is the first one that I ever painted, so don't make fun of my paint job. I am relatively new to this hobby as well. But the Space Marine was a joy to paint. The fact that it comes broken apart into little pieces that you can paint the torso, the head, you can do things separately if you want to, is awesome. I chose to put it all together and to paint it as it was, maybe making things a little difficult for myself. But the print has crisp, clean edges once you clean it all off and you put it together. And it doesn't require a lot to do that. It's pretty simple. But painting wise, it was a joy to paint. I put it together, primed it, and just got the colors that I wanted and started painting it. Again, I'm a novice painter, so it wasn't a fantastic paint job. But for me, and being my first Space Marine, it was a very positive experience. Next up, we have a resin model that I printed for my current D&D campaign. This is my double-axed orc. And this was my first attempt at doing some, lighting and some shading and things like that, and using washes and things. And so it was very fun to paint. Quality-wise, I feel like the quality is very good. But just like we were talking about before with cost, this was printed on a 2K resin printer. Okay, so it is definitely not the highest quality. Some of the highest quality out there right now is 8K, and that's a 8K, printer. And so that's the finest detail that you're going to get. And does that rival the plastic? From what I've seen, it does. We can pull up some pictures that show the difference in quality between a standard, a 4K, an 8K, and things like that. And you can see how that differs. But when it comes to painting, in my experience, it was almost the same. Again, my printer isn't an 8K printer, and so the quality was a little less than the plastic model. And I still liked it, though. I still thought it went on easy after I primed it. It painted smooth, easy, clean edges. Not as clean as the plastic, but close. And a joy to paint. So, I give it a 4 out of 5. Whereas with the plastic, I would give it a 5 out of 5. And then last up is just a simple FDM miniature. This werewolf is one of the first FDM miniatures I printed. And as you can see, it's not to scale. It's not a 28 millimeter. If I hold it next to this Space Marine, it is a good deal larger than the Space Marine. But the quality turned out really good for FDM, and I was very happy with it. This was the first one that I've ever used speed paints on, and I actually made my own speed paints. And we'll go over that in a quick little video of how to make your own speed paints. But I thought the quality came off very well. I heard once that because of the lines in an FDM print, they're a little bigger than anything else, but because of that, it holds paint a little better. Do I believe that? In my experience, that hasn't quite been the case. They don't have the clean, crisp lines that the other printers do. And so whereas a resin would be a 4 out of 5, I would say an FDM is probably going to be closer to a 2. Can you paint it and have it look good, and can you use it for your tabletop gaming? Of course. Is it going to look as great as all those print jobs that you've seen online? No, it never will. And so in my mind, clearly the plastic models win this round. Round 2 and plastic models have made a comeback. Can the new boy 3D printing fight them off? Stay tuned to find out. So last up, let's talk durability. All of the plastic miniatures that I have dealt with have been very durable. I've dropped them multiple times. I've dropped the entire container of them, and they've held together for the most part. They're plastic. It's a durable plastic. It's not a brittle plastic, and so they hold together quite well. And worst case scenario, an arm pops off, but guess what? It's a jointed arm, so it doesn't break. It just pops out, and then you can just glue it back into place. So in my experience with durability, Warhammer and the 3D, the not the 3D printed, the plastic models that I've dealt with have all been pretty resilient. Resin, on the other hand, can be extremely brittle. Now, there are 100 different kinds of resin that you can get. There are certain kinds of resin that are rubbery, and then when you drop your miniature, it will never break, but your weapons will come out and they'll curve to one side or things like that. And so it's very different. Can you get very durable ones? Yes. In my experience, have I had those just printing normal resin? Mine have been relatively brittle and they have broken. I can glue them back together, but it's always a pain, especially when you're dealing with something so small. There are multiple things you can do to resin to make it so they're not as brittle, but I'm going off of printing as quickly as I can, curing as quickly as I can, getting the models ready as quick as I can. And so the things that I have done have always resulted in more brittle models. I could definitely try out different kinds of resin. I can try curing it not as long. I've seen that when you don't cure it for as long, they are a little more malleable and don't break. But being in sunlight cures them, and so they're going to be cured on their own with time anyway. And so as far as durability goes, resin can be top notch and it can be at the bottom. It just depends on what time you want to put into it. And FDM printing. With an FDM printer, I have had both. It just depends on the filament that you buy. Some are more brittle than others. Some are heavier than others. Some are lighter than others. And so it's up in the air. You'll have to take a couple of years and drop them and see if they break or not. But in my experience, FDM has been pretty resilient in most things. And so with durability, I feel like it probably shouldn't even be a factor, because all of these models have been made with the intent of being durable. And so if you make your 3D prints with the intent of being durable, they can be. And they can be just as durable as any 3D model. So I think we walk away from this one with it being even across the board, depending on the work and the time that you're going to put into it. So, in the end, what does it come down to? As always, it's your preference. It's your decision. Is resin, 3D printing better than going out and buying the models? That's up to you. One of the huge, huge drawbacks that we don't talk about too much, and it's only in wargaming that it applies, is that most wargaming tournaments, you can't use 3D printed models. You can use purchase models with 3D printed parts. You can kit bash your models and change them up a little bit, but ultimately the core pieces have to be purchased from Games Workshop. So that right there, that could change your whole outlook on 3D printing versus the models. Because why get a 3D printer if you can't pay competitively? But if you're playing with friends and if you're just playing with your local shop or things like that, and you're just doing it to have fun and you don't want to get into the competitive scene, for my money, 3D printing is where it's at. By a lot? No. But enough to make it worth it for me. In the end, you'll have to decide what you think is worth more. And with that, the match is over. It's down to the judges and points alone that will determine this fight. Both contenders gave it their all, and in the end, our judges have deemed that the winner is... I've always hated those YouTube videos where they say, we're going to have this versus this, and then in the end, the answer is, well, they're the same. It's up to you. Get what you want. I always like it when a YouTuber has their opinions, and so I want to share my opinion on this. And if I haven't made it clear enough already, it's this. 3D printing will always trump buying the plastic models. It's only a matter of time before the rest of the world figures out that you can do the same hobby that other companies are charging you $500 a year for $100, $200 a year. And it's only a matter of time before they catch up and they realize that they're missing out on a huge opportunity. There are certain games out there right now that are taking advantage of that. I'm in the middle of creating my own tabletop skirmish game that will use 3D printed models. It'll have its rules. It'll have its everything set out. It'll be fun, and it'll be accessible to anybody who wants to play. And more than that, if you want to get a friend into it, you don't have to pay $500 to buy them an army to get them into it. You can print them one for $20, see if they like it, and then they can move forward. It will not only make 3D gaming, tabletop gaming, more accessible to you, but to the people that you want to join you. And I think if we can get to that point, tabletop gaming will grow far beyond what it's already become. And so for my opinion, as a content creator, 3D printing is the way of the future. So jump on board. And as always, don't spend so much time creating your world that you forget to spend some time in it. Until next time. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using a marker to draw on a mustache for myself, it's simply because, I can't draw my own. I can't grow my own. Well, look at that. That right there is a ghetto mustache.